Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the author of a book I read recently. Her name is Betty Kovacs, and the name of her book is called Merchants of Light. And it is a source material for a lot of the historical data that I'm giving you today. So the name of my talk this morning is The Great Awakening, Becoming Superhuman. So from our earliest beginning, ancient man lived in harmony with nature. Through rhythmic cycles of day and night, the seasons and the heavenly processions displayed during the night. His needs were simple: eat, sleep, and procreate. The first two were the urgings of the physical, and the latter was how he learned about unconditional love and how life seeks its perpetuation through the birth of children. Evolution brought tools and language and a greater need that could not be met on the physical plane. Ancient man sought to embody the spirit of the natural world around him in order to work with it. He knew that world as sacred and regarded everything, including himself, as such. So the hunt for food was done by honoring the animals through pictographs on walls and ceremonial dance. All life was integrated in this way. Later, with the advent of language, then words added the empowering symbols for manifesting in their reality. The shaman, using words, music, and dance, then led the group in a ceremony to experience the sacred, often using plants and other means to induce altered states of consciousness. This holistic way of living and being was due to the third eye being open and right brain activity predominant. This allowed imagination and visions to flow freely and intuition to be dominant in the decision-making. They remembered their past lives and continued the tradition of their ancestors who knew how to use the light within to manifest in the outer world. When we lived in close relation to the natural world, our collective stories explained our world in mystical terms and symbols, giving equal value to visions and imagination as to where to find fresh water. We knew fear and we knew love, but from a balanced perspective. Today, we still live from those two perspectives. However, the stories are deep within our subconscious. Our fears are unprocessed traumas and keep us in pain, and our love is locked up in conditionality. We find documented proof of a pantheistic, which means God in everything, view of nature shown through the artifacts from prehistory in the Indus Valley. It was the Bronze Age civilization in northwestern regions of South Asia, lasting from 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE. The more recent discovery of the Göbekli Tepe in Turkey by archaeologists has now thrown our understanding of prehistoric humanity wide open, as this site goes back even further in time to 11,500 years ago. Until now, there was a presumption that primitive hunter-gatherers did not in any way live collectively and build places of worship out of stone, some of which weigh up to 16 tons. We wonder who those people were. So it stands to reason that the carved stone art from that period also served the same purpose. The collective stories we have told and retold over the millennia have shaped the Western world's understanding of who we are and our relationship to the divine. Unfortunately, over that period of time, truth, the gift of our divinity, our true nature, has been corrupted, resulting in a regression of our evolution, both emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So that at this point in our evolution, our intellect has expanded exponentially, has given us much in the way of scientific understanding, but at the expense of the wisdom of the heart, leaving us living out of balance and believing all life is a fluke and has no meaning. And from the secret doctrine, Civilization has ever developed the physical and intellectual at the cost of the psychic and the spiritual. The command and guidance over his own psychic nature, which foolish men now associate with the supernatural, came to man as naturally as walking and thinking. Magic in those days meant science of wisdom, knowledge of the secrets of nature, but they have only become secrets in our race and were public property within the third race of humans. The atrophy of the third eye in man, which was a physical organ in the previous race, disappeared due to materiality and depravity of man before the bulk of Atlantis continent disappeared. So a great shift happened, which closed us off from our natural gifts with this physical change. I would say that the obstacle that keeps us from living our superhuman selves was a result of that shift, and why we have been living all these thousands of years in a kind of collective dream of forgetting. The stories and myths from formalized religion played a part in our development too. The sacred knowledge was hidden and instead relegated to a closed group of men who turned it into a set of dogma, substituting direct connection to the divine, to truth, with an unbalanced separative system of belief, which was crucial for the purpose of controlling the collective narrative. Previously, it was the job of the shaman as messenger for the gods, through their intuitive connection to the stars and natural world, by relaying visions and oracles to the leader of the clan or head of state. This information worked out in sacred geometry has given us the thousands of sacred sites that were built all over the planet directly over Earth's power spots. This shaman mystic tradition is hearkening us back to a new, old story, the story of the Holy Trinity that includes the divine feminine, a necessary counterpoint to the divine male, a story in which we will, in time, reclaim that which has been lost, suppressed, and declared heresy in order to come into our natural, balanced, holistic, more adept selves once more. We are discovering how our male-dominated left brain thinking has created a world devoured of the subtle nuances of the mystery of life, giving rise to hopelessness, agnosticism, as if all we call life has no meaning and no purpose. Today's science is greatly changing the narrative, however, based on ongoing discoveries from quantum physics. It is giving us new understanding and perspectives beyond our wildest dreams, and will, in time, I believe, concur with what the ancients have been saying all along. Organized religion, however, has changed very little. It continues to practice as it has over the centuries with little change, continuing to suppress the ancient wisdom, the wisdom of the shaman, mystic, which is our birthright, and which is drawing millions of us today, searching for meaning and purpose in our lives. So let's look back in history and see how and when the ancient wisdom was lost and recovered over many cycles of time. These were ages of enlightenment after going occult, meaning hidden, in order to be preserved. So beginning in Egypt, recorded in stone under the reign of King Akhenaten in 1349 to 1334 BCE, before the current era, the pharaoh instituted the state religion of a single god, the sun god Ra. That he vanquished the pantheistic view of the divine in all of nature with their various gods. They had a god for everything: wind, water, earth, all of those things, all of the natural things. In order to carry out his mission, he sent slaves to deface by chiseling out any references to former gods that reflected their former religion on buildings and stelae So when I was in Egypt, I saw this. There were beautiful carvings, but there were parts of the carving that were kind of destroyed or defaced. We've seen these same practices in modern times by the Islamic State. They defaced and destroyed many ancient historic religious figures of stone. They were trying to erase and replace the past so as to control the minds and hearts to adhere to their ideology. And more recently in our own country, you've probably all heard about book bannings that's happening across the states and the ban of teaching our sad history of slavery. This is the oldest form of social control. Remember, he that controls the narrative controls the power. We've seen this through history. Okay, there's the second slide. So this ancient wisdom, and here's all of these references here, given by the various names, but it's all the same source material. The names being the mysticism of the Gnostics, the Hermetics. I'm sorry, Judy. Is this slide number 2? Hello? Okay, let's go back one. Thank you. All right. So the source is the same, but it's Christian Gnosticism, Hermetics, Kabbalists, Rosicrucian, and of course the ancient wisdom from the East, from the Bhagavad Gita. So, but for our purposes here, I'm going to focus on more modern practices. We'll show the ancient traditions from our ancestors through the ages, whose views varied so greatly from those of the church or state as to be a source of persecution, as in the Inquisitions, the witch trials, and other forms of oppression, so as to stamp out any narrative or practice that was not in line with the powers that be. With the advent of writing, the earliest recorded historical records to date are from the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia, present-day Iran, Turkey, and Syria of the first millennium. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was a public library, an intellectual center where Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars, both men and women, studied the humanities, science, math, astronomy, medicine, alchemy, chemistry, and more, including alchemical texts, and they deciphered the hieroglyphic signs 1,000 years before the West did. During this same time, the Church of Rome was destroying much of the ancient world, causing pagan scholars and sages to flee to the Arab lands. It was here, ironically, that the ancient wisdom, both intellectual and spiritual, was preserved. Later, this ancient wisdom merged with Sufism around 883 to 539. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So here's all of the time frames for the material I'm going to talk about. The first being from 300 to 1000 of the current era. The Church of Rome suppressed the tradition legend of the Holy Grail, a symbol of divine grace and a symbol of moral, spiritual purity. That changed during the 12th century Renaissance, the first wave which brought forward the idea of the heart as central to a pathway to the divine and to a higher state of consciousness. Concurrently, the arts flourished once more. Arab alchemical texts translated into Latin and Jewish shaman mysticism of the Zohar were studied. All of this, plus the many churches built across Europe at this time with their ancient wisdom traditions. This was in stark contrast to the Roman Catholicism, which divorced itself from the divine feminine by proclaiming one God, the masculine father, damaging the Western psyche during those years of repression. The second wave of the was called the Italian Renaissance from 1460 to 1527. This was led by a newly discovered corpus hermeticum, the writing of Hermes Trismegistus. This is the source material from which I spoke to you about last time, which instructed in the art of direct experience with the divine. It was brought back from Macedonia by Cosimo Medici, a ruling nobleman during this time, and it today is located in the Medici Library in Florence, Italy. Macedonia today is those parts of Greece, Bulgaria, and smaller parts of Albania, Serbia, and Kosovo. These were ancient manuscripts which the church had hoped to destroy. These writings, as well as those from Egypt, Byzantium, and Islam, were the origin of this flourishing of culture. And Leonardo da Vinci was its most shining example of the unlimited potential of the human being who lived during this time. He gave us some of the richest uses of allegorical symbols in his art, and Vitruvian Man being one of them. The third wave came with the Rosicrucian Enlightenment from 1600 to 1620, and it brought an expansion of consciousness during the High Middle Ages. This movement was originally started by Jesus' disciple Mark in the year 46 AD, with the conversion of an Egyptian Gnostic and 6 followers. It spurred a flurry of creative and intellectual thinking that spanned from England to Prague and beyond. The movement set off advances in intellectual, scientific pursuits, and also heart-centered union with the divine. The symbol of the rose signifies unity, merging all of nature with human nature. It promised true enlightenment rooted in mystical experience and scientific exploration. They saw change to society possible through a complete change to religious education and freedom from a repressive church and state. One of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, was a Rosicrucian. Soon, though, political propaganda escalated and railed against them, causing witch hunts and 30 years of war between Protestants and Catholics, causing the movement ultimately to fail and go once more underground. It showed up again in New Orleans in 1764, when a French colony of immigrants set up the Loge du Parfait, translated to mean the right of perfection. It was the origin of the Illuminati in America, an offshoot of Rosicrucianism in the New World. It was short-lived, though. It was put down when New Orleans was ceded to Spain, the Catholic Spanish crown, being hostile and intolerant to any form of Freemasonry. The so-called French Enlightenment followed in 1789. Its chief agenda was promoting abstract thinking, which diverged from the previous heart-centered movements. The proponents stressed the exploration in the outer world, leading to years of political and religious control, misinformation, fear tactics, lack of adequate education, and years of repression. The fourth wave of the Renaissance happened concurrently in Germany and England in the year 1775 to 1850. There were two ideas at this time. The first being social reform, which proposed a representative, democratic form of government to level the field between the rich and the poor. The second being religious freedom by separation of church and state, which proposed the state had no authority in the liberty of man's conscience. These were the very ideals that brought the Pilgrims to the New World, to America, and blossomed into the forming of the United States of America. I believe the last phase, and this was not in her book, but I'm going to add it here because I think a lot of us lived through this time, and this was happening in the age of Aquarius. Remember that? In the 1960s? Our culture was turned upside down with a new way of being and thinking, pushing the boundaries beyond social norms of past generation. It set off a wave of renewed interest in all of the sources of the ancient wisdom, particularly from the East. All areas of our culture felt the effects of this new age, from interest in consciousness, spirituality, to new ways of dress, music, arts, the rise of feminism, and a desire to tear down old structure, protests, of course. We understood and we mourned the futility of war. Do you remember when the Beatles went to India to study with the Maharishi? That was a defining moment, wasn't it? All of these stages of our collective conscious are signs of the cyclic nature of life. Energy forces come in to flourish, then diminish, seemingly to be lost or destroyed. But the seeds of truth are never destroyed, and they only wait to return again for a deeper, more meaningful impact on our society. Each cycle brings us into greater and greater intellectual and heart-centered development. When a society reaches that subtlety, it becomes super sensitive to the smallest fluctuations in thought, such as our values, beliefs, worldviews, and aspirations. What we are witnessing right now in the world that feels like everything is tearing apart into chaos is, I believe, simply the death throes of old power dynamics, paradigms, and ideologies. The power structures that have kept the masses in check for their benefit no longer fit in the new world where they do not serve the greater human good. And for the new world paradigm to be born, old structures must be torn down. Just another cycle, another season in our evolution. So the gifts from our ancestors that they lived and died to preserve were the gifts of the tree of life. It is the knowledge that we are immortal, divine, and creative. And it is with this knowledge that we are creating a new world in harmony with the laws of the universe. It means that at our very essence, we are not material beings. By reconnecting to that essence, we can begin to reclaim our gifts and talents beyond the physical that have for too long remained outside our stories and our beliefs. Now we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So looking to the past for our direction, we need to understand and put into practice that which serves our highest good on our path for our evolution. It is our moral responsibility as human beings. Undoing our beliefs is no small task and takes great determination, a steady will, and new messages, of course. This is not one and done. All subtle bodies need to be clean and clear for transformation to occur. I'm talking about the rewiring of the brain, transmuting our lower energies into their higher ones through the emotional body and clearing judgment from our mental body. These are essential. So the human physical body has all the tools it needs in order to develop the skills and abilities that were part of our day-to-day living for our ancient ancestors. These are our psychic blueprints from our ancestors stored in our DNA, which are informing us and igniting our passion for our own development. That requires the right food, the right portions, along with physical exercise. We all know this. The emotional body is where our biggest challenge is. The chaos we are seeing in the world is just a reflection of the darkness and unhealed traumas within ourselves. So doing the hard work of discovery, we can call on angelic beings for their assistance. We can become self-aware. And we can be aware of our emotional responses by keeping our emotions tempered with judgment That's how we heal and transmute the energy to its higher corresponding chakra in the body. It is also how we magnetize the body to draw in greater volumes of light. You know we run on light. Yes? Yes. Okay. When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Amen, she says. Oh, yes. And then the mind. The mind without connection to the heart is a cold and self-centered entity, and so it needs the heart connection to mediate this tendency. When the mind is sufficiently modified by the influence of the heart, all decisions are colored by its warmth. The treasures of the universe makes all things manifest for the being. It seeks to reward in greater and greater degree and quantity in correspondence to the heart. The mind, though, is a fickle organ and needs training in the form of stillness, which is the work of meditation. It builds physical structure, neural pathways in the brain that become scaffolding for the stabilization of more introduced light into our biology. More light means a higher frequency, a higher consciousness. It becomes permanent and not just an episode. To do this work daily and slowly, you will see the reward that awaits you in the silence. Learn to recognize the voice of the higher self from the ego. With practice, this becomes obvious. And last, the soul, as a subtle body, is evolving just as we are. Each one is unique and individual. It speaks to us through the emotional body, which is registered in the heart and translated by the brain, and is therefore experiential, meaning it evolves by its interaction with people and things in the world. The soul is attracting that which it needs to learn. So good or bad experiences, we get them to the degree that the soul is seeking to learn and integrate these lessons from your personal experiences, and most profoundly through the ones that happen over and over, is what the soul came here to learn. And we'll take the last slide, Janice. So in conclusion, and I hope you're all still with me, I know this is a bunch, our beliefs are formed from a collection of stories, some inherited from our parents, some from our ancestors, our national identity that defines our worldview. A worldview where magic has been scrubbed from our psyche, leaving us with the dry bones of rational thinking and life devoid of meaning. It is precisely the reason why we are all here at this moment in time, incarnating as a soul group in order to reclaim our lost history. The rich symbology in the ancient texts must be interpreted and embodied with a new perspective, metaphysically, for our modern times, to help guide us on our evolutionary path. The ancient wisdom has survived through cycles of time, and for good reason. This material is no longer hidden or forbidden, and it is accessible as an online search. It invites us into a deeper, closer experience with the divine, that spark that lives in us and seeks our higher good always. It promotes more right brain thinking, imagination, intuition, clairvoyance, etc. Okay. Our path to the future lies in a clear understanding of our ancestral spiritual practices and understanding of the world and all of nature. Understanding our world and the universe in a holistic way gives us the right perspective. We have the whole universe inside of us, which quantum physics is telling us today. We are witnessing the convergence of science and spirituality. Let's build new stories. Let's bring back the magic. Let's attune our minds and our bodies with the right food and thoughts for the new superhuman and the new earth. Let's not wait. The future is right here and right now. Thank you. Namaste.